Hello, it's been a while since the last time I spoke about the Korg Volca sample, and this is the first of a few other tutorials on the Volca sample that I wasn't available to do at the time. This one will focus on the global settings, and to access the global settings you have to press the function key while you turn the Volca sample on. As you can see, these two buttons will flash and you have the options displayed on these first 8 pads. So the first pad, it's the auto power off, so you can have it on or off. So if you have it on, it will shut down after some time. I don't think they specify it. Probably it's like the Electrabs is after 4 hours. And if you have it off, then you can leave the Volca sample on, it won't turn off. Personally, I usually disable this one. The second step, well, as you can see, I'm always using the AC transformer, but if you have batteries and if they are nickel metal batteries, you should have this one on. And actually nickel metal, well, nickel something. And if you have an alkaline battery, then you should have this one off. This is more for the Volca sample to know when the batteries are running down, so that you don't lose any data. Then the pads 3 and 4 are basically the sync signals, the output signal and the input signal. They can be low or high. This is the shape that I'm going to put on your screen of the sync signal in low modes. And this is the shape of the sync signal in high mode. Most of the time it's high mode, so it's the sync signal happens on when the signal goes up, and this is the standard for the Volca range, the Electrabs, also the monotribe, and I strongly recommend you to keep these settings. This is I suppose a 3.3 volt sync pulse. On the 5th position you have the tempo range. When it's disabled, it means that you have the narrow tempo range, and now if I save the configuration pressing the record key, the Volca sample will start, and you can see the tempo range goes from 66 to 240 beats per minute. And now I'm going to turn this one off again and press Fun, go again into the global settings, and now I'm going to activate the pad number 5. So now I have the full tempo range. Again, I'm going to save these settings using the record key. If I wanted to cancel these settings, I would press the play key. And now the tempo goes from 10 BPMs to a wobbling 600 BPM. Of course, you lose a lot of fine-tuning when you put this in high range. What I usually have, I have most of my Volcas in the narrow range, and I think it's the Volca Bass. I usually have it, yes, it's a Volca Bass. I usually have it in the high range, and it's particularly interesting when you have very low settings for the tempo, because you can have very long ring and very long phrases going on. Steps 6 and 7 relate to the MIDI part of it. So step 6 relates to the clock settings. If it is on, which is the default value, it's in automatic mode. Automatic mode has in many synthesizers means that if you have nothing connected, it will use the internal clock, but as soon as you connect a MIDI cable that is sending MIDI clock, it will be a slave to that incoming MIDI signal. If you have it disabled, so it's internal clock only, even if you have a clock source going into the MIDI input, the Volca sample will remain using the internal clock. Step 7 has an interesting feature. It switches on and off the short real-time MIDI messages. So if it is on, it will receive not only the tempo clock, but it will also receive the play and stop messages from a central MIDI controller. In fact, we'll have this setting. Okay, you can turn this off by just deselecting it, but we'll keep this one, and I'm going to take a MIDI cable that is coming from my main controller, and sorry, I cannot change the camera now, and I can use the main controller to start and stop the sequencer, and I can also affect the tempo on the MIDI controller. This is very nice for use in the studio, especially if you have a lot of synthesizers and you want to have everything going on at the same time. Let's go again to the other part and the old Volcas, like the bass, the keys and the beats, they only have about the same settings for the first 7 steps, but the Volca Sample and also the Volca FM have an 8th setting, which is the number of peaks per step, or the sync input-output unit. What this means is that when you have this one off, you have 2 steps between peaks. This is what the Volca Bass is expecting. And if we go and try, I put the sync output here, I put the sync input here, so now I have a very simple 4 on the floor. Let's put this a little bit slower so that you can feel better the tempo change. And now let's start. And as you can see, even when I increase the swing in the Volca sample, the Volca Bass remains in the strict. That's because the swing affects the the swing affects the even steps, and because it's 1 pulse per 2 steps, each step goes as a pair, so the Volca Bass doesn't know what he's doing. And if I put now 1 peak per step, let's say this one, then the Volca Bass will play at double tempo of that of the Volca sample. So now we can perhaps reduce this one to about 50. But still the Volca Bass doesn't know what is swing, and you can see that when I start dialing in some swing here, the Volca Bass will start acting a little bit funny. This doesn't mean it's not interesting. Actually, I find it interesting to have a kind of alter swing, but it's not what we would expect. Let's stop this one. And okay, 2 things about the sync. One is that the sync pulse doesn't require the sequencer to be on. And another thing, if you notice that the vocals are getting out of sync too often, usually it is the cable connecting it that is a little bit broken. As it turns out, as you could see when I show you the sync pulses, the pulses are very short, so if your cable is not within spec, it will usually make the receiving unit lose some sync pulses. Okay, so using the magic of editing, I managed to get the Volca FM here. So now they are both in the default settings. I'm going to connect the output of the Volca FM to the input of the output of the sample to the input of the FM, and okay, and because they are on 2 pulses per step, or 2 steps per pulse, you cannot have the swing on the Volca FM. However, let's turn both of these machines down, and let's start both in the settings. Oh, I still have this one on with auto power off, and let's put both units using the sync step 1 and save it. As you can see, the operation between the two Volcas is very similar, and it's very similar to the operation with the other Volcas. And now we have swing going to the sync, via the sync signal to the Volca FM. Now, of course, it is a pity that Korg doesn't release a firmware update to the other Volcas to allow the swing, but it's very nice to have. Perhaps not on this setting, but let's try some other. Yeah, it's much better this way. So yeah, while Korg doesn't release a firmware update on the more analog Volcas, this is what you have. You have the possibility to use swing, but when you do this, the other Volcas, the older one that are not set to the 1 step per pulse, will start playing a double time, and also you will not have a swing, but you can always do some interesting stuff like I did with the Volca Bass previously. So I hope you enjoyed. I'm guessing this episode is a little bit longer than the other ones, and also a little bit more talkative, but during the last year I noticed that most people would like me to talk a little bit more on the tutorials, so here I am trying to do that, and I hope you enjoy, and of course enjoy your Volca.